All right, so it's 7:05. We're gonna go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Grace Yang, a junior from Rochester Adams High School and the president of Michigan Youth Empowerment's Youth Leadership Committee. Michigan Youth Empowerment Foundation is a 501c3 dedicated to promoting STEM education and supporting K-12 students in the new technological world. Welcome to our first Beat Live, an extension of our website, myebeat.com. We are very honored to host this seminar that's garnered the attention of parents and students from a variety of places, all the way from Texas to Windsor, Canada, and of course, our home base, Michigan. Today, we're going to be exploring the world of college applications. We've gathered an extremely talented group of students from this year's graduating class. And if you have any questions while they speak, feel free to send those questions to the Q&A function here on Zoom. Let me get started by giving a brief introduction of each guest. So first we have Shuheng Zhang. Shuheng attended Washington International High School, which uses the IB rather than AP system. Throughout high school, he was very involved in piano as a long young scholar, which allowed him to give performances around the US, the UK, Poland, along with performing chamber music alongside members of the Berlin Philharmonic. He also performed concertos with orchestras like the Ann Arbor Symphony and attended some selective music festivals and competitions. At school, he was a member of student government and served as vice president of his student government. He also co-founded a music club, served as conductor for a small chamber music group, and was a board member of his Asian Student Association. Beyond that, he also played club hockey and was assistant captain for a season. Shuhung became involved with MYE, Michigan Youth Empowerment, through our Close to the Masters program. Shuhung, could you please say hi to our audience?
Yeah, hey everyone. Hope you're having a good evening so far.
So next up, we have Edison Chu. Edison attended Troy High School. He was heavily involved in leadership in his school, serving as the president of both Science Olympiad and HOSA, vice president of the Orchestra Association of Troy High, and the president of the Alliance of Youth Leaders in the U.S., and a student leader in his robotics team. Throughout high school, he has been on his school's JV soccer team and varsity track. He has received the Presidential Volunteer Service Award multiple times for his volunteer work with MYE and other organizations. Eddie has been on both of MYE's global service trips and has been a teaching assistant for MYE's Arduino class and is also an alumni of our public speaking class. Edison, could you also please say hi to our audience?
Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here and I'm excited to share my advice and experiences with everyone.
Finally, we have MYE's very own Richard Lee. Richard also attended Troy High School. He served as a section leader and squad leader in his marching band and a secretary of his school's physics club. This year, Richard has also released a full album of music, all written and produced by himself. And if you would like, you can also find it on Spotify under AEIO Music. Richard has also received the Presidential Volunteer Service Award multiple times. At MYE, Richard was the previous vice president of Michigan Youth Empowerment's Youth Leadership Committee, took many of our classes, and now teaches his own writing class. Richard, could you say hi to our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the little plug for my music. My name is Richard Lee. So I've just graduated, and I'm actually going to be taking a gap year before I enter the class of 2021 at Olin. Most of you guys probably don't know what that school is, so I'll actually give it a little bit of an introduction. I like bragging about it anyways. It's a small private engineering school in Needham, Massachusetts. It has like roughly a 13% acceptance rate. And I wanted to go there because it has like a super innovative, like team-based, project-based curriculum, and that many other Ivy Leagues and prestigious schools are learning from right now.
So, given that I have this amazing group of students here with me, I want to take this time to ask you guys a couple of things that might be on the minds of the audience. How did you guys prepare throughout high school for college apps? For example, how did you decide which classes to take, which extracurriculars to commit your time to, and how did you balance your academics and extracurriculars?
Yeah, so prepare for at least my experience is a interesting word since I can't say that I exactly was preparing for college, my high school life. In fact, I never really thought about applying to any colleges, let alone Ivy Leagues, until application season came around, since I was very much just focused with what I was doing with my own personal life. So starting off with classes. So Washington International High School is an IB school. And as a slightly smaller school, we didn't have too much of an option on what classes we got to choose. So I just went with whatever classes they had assigned, except in the IB course in your junior and senior year, because I'm sure some of the audience are taking the IB program, you get to choose between your standard level courses or your higher level courses. So the higher level courses I chose were based off of my own interest and how it applied to my life going forward into the future. First, I picked math because I personally think that math, no matter what field you go to, is one of the most important foundation you have to have. It's the basis of rational thinking in almost every subject that you would ever look into. Second, I chose music because music has been pretty much the thing that preoccupied me half of my life and is what I plan on doing, will hopefully plan on doing as a future career. And then finally, I chose literature as my final higher level course because literature is always really closely related with music. I mean, the humanities all are very much dependent on each other, and the history of them has all been affected by each other. So the three higher level courses were pretty much all based on my own personal strengths and interests. Now, with regards to extracurriculars that I chose, so we are going to be talking about extracurriculars later, but to start with, I always believed in having a sense of balance in my life. And I've always wanted to gain that balance by doing things that legitimately mattered to me. So I cared about my community, my school community, since it offered so much for me. And so I decided to join student government where I could directly serve the school community. I really enjoyed music, so I did a lot of piano, which was my main extracurricular. I think the thing that really set me out to a lot of colleges. And I did a whole bunch of other extracurriculars that weren't just music related, since I wanted to have balance in my life. I did hockey because I believe that first and foremost, before you can even have a healthy mind, you have to have a healthy body. As I'm sure many like philosophers in the past agree that the mind and the soul, I mean, the body and the soul are very, very closely tied together. So I think don't do things solely for college. Do things you genuinely care about. And obviously, it will be hard to find something that you truly care about. But if you do enough exploration, you will find something that sticks out to you eventually.
Yeah, and to add on to that, I really like what Chuang said about like balance and finding stuff that you like. So I think that'll really be beneficial for you guys to plan out your high school career. And the way I like to think about this, because I actually made a ton of mistakes with regards to planning that I hope I can help you guys avoid. I like to split the high school experience in half. So you begin with freshman and sophomore year, and then you end with junior and senior year. So with freshman and sophomore year, I would say absolutely exactly what Shuhan said. Focus on exploring. These years should be the times where you participate in 4 or 5 clubs every single semester just to find out what you really, really like. Because your workload is probably not going to be that hard. You'll probably be able to have a little bit of extra time to devote to these clubs, and you'll be able to find what you really like, especially because most of like the 8th graders and freshmen here, like they don't actually know what they want to do with their futures. I know I definitely didn't. So this exploring not only helps you find something that you like to do, but it could also potentially determine what you'll do with the rest of your life, what you'll do for your career. So aside from exploring clubs, exploring what subjects you enjoy, I would also say that you should find something outside of school, outside of extracurriculars that you really love. Because if you're able to find something that is outside of all of this, you'll have an extra thing to talk about on your college apps, in your interviews, with people who want to know who you are. Because when it comes to college app season, people will want to know who you are. And if you're just a textbook or you're just something extracurricular, you're not interesting. And there are a ton of boring people who apply to college, and you don't want to be one of them. So your freshman and sophomore year should be devoted to making you interesting, to give you something to commit to. And that, of course, brings me to junior and senior year, where hopefully you are finding something to commit to. At this point, you've hopefully already participated in a bunch of clubs, discovered what you really liked, and are now able to find something that you're willing to go that extra level in. So that'd be finding leadership positions or finding ways to further devote yourself to that club by participating in all of their activities or something like that. this is where you're able to show that I really like this one thing. So say it's physics club. You really, really like physics, so you're going to get a leadership position in physics club. And I know it's probably easier said than done going for leadership positions, but if you're able to, you should give it your all, because if you can get a leadership position, it demonstrates on your resume that you really enjoy this thing. And of course, come junior and senior year, you should also be hoping to show progression with that extra thing outside of school and extracurriculars I was talking about earlier. So for me, that was music composition. So freshman year, I wrote my first song in like April for this one thing we had at school called Mr. Troy High. I wrote a really, really cheesy love song that I hoped would make me look cute. And I guess it kind of did, because I was like a 5 foot tall freshman. But that was the first song that I ever wrote. And then come senior year, I had released an album. So that's the kind of progression that we're showing through the years, right? So I've not just continued dabbling in writing cute love songs for talent shows. I moved on and began learning how to produce even better, and I became someone who wrote an album. And I think that that's something that's also really important.
Yeah, and just to emphasize on what Richard and Truhung both said, I think one of the most important things while in high school is involvement. The earlier on that you establish which clubs you're really passionate about, which things that you do want to do in the future, the better. Because this way you can start making your connections with other people in the club, with your advisors, and with the community around the entire country. So basically, once you establish like which things you're actually really passionate and want to become involved with, one of my first advices is, if you are the type of person that is really outgoing and likes leading others, run for all the leadership roles. For me, this meant becoming the president of Science Olympiad. At my school, Science Olympiad is one of the most competitive clubs to get into, and I managed to get in my freshman year. So during that, I was still kind of exploring everything, just kind of getting to know the people on my team and getting to know everything around me. But as the years went on, I realized that Science Olympiad was one of the things that I was most passionate about, just because I wanted to go into a STEM career in the future. So as I progressed through my years, I made sure to make more connections, become more friendly with everyone around me in my team and with teams like in other schools too, because obviously you want to be a good sport to everyone. And then you also want to show your officers and all the other people on the team that you are truly dedicated. You want to start getting better and better scores at competitions and show that you really do care about this club. So then that way, when senior year came, I ran for Science Olympiad president, and it was pretty set in stone for me because of just all the commitments that I had throughout the 4 years. In addition to that, not just leadership roles, you can reach out to national boards, like for example, Science Olympiad. You can reach out to the national organization, see if there's any involvements that you can do across the country. You can start new initiatives. Also for Science Olympiad, one of my most involved clubs, this meant hosting a workshop over the summer for middle school and elementary school students in over 30 different Science Olympiad events. This was both a really good fundraiser for our club, and also I really enjoyed it, just getting our name out there, helping others, doing what we could in our Science Olympiad club. And also, you can also create teams at your school for related competitions. I know people in my school started a club for like an Ocean Bowl related competition just because they're passionate about that. So the bottom line is you just want to figure out everything that you can do to become more involved in whatever clubs or extracurriculars that you're interested in. And then on top of that, throughout high school, time management is definitely one of the most important things. I know probably a lot of teachers keep emphasizing this, but that's because it is completely correct. You definitely have more time than you think. A lot of people, and I myself included, you like to think in kind of terms of chunking things. Like you'll say, oh, I want to study physics from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock. And then I'll give myself maybe a 10-minute break. And then I want to study English from like another hour for another hour. But in doing so, I figured out throughout the years that this kind of limits your time. You want to make sure that you're getting in as much studying, as much work in your free time as possible. So this means that if you're like waiting in line at an office, you can be studying notes on your phone. Or if you finish an assignment early in class, you could be working on another assignment. This is just so much extra time that you may not see at first, but eventually if you get into the habit of utilizing that, then you'll figure out that you actually do have like a lot more time. Also, don't be scared to work with your friends on assignments if that's allowed, of course. It helped me a lot in high school, like studying with tests. I would always study with people that I knew would help me study and I could help them study. And it ended up helping me get a lot better test scores.
Yeah, and just to sort of go through a couple of examples of like some of the stuff that the three of us did. For me personally, band was always something that was really attractive to me because I'm kind of a music guy. So I played the clarinet, and I entered the symphonic band as a freshman, which is the top ensemble, and I got lucky enough to get in. And afterwards, I began to realize, wow, I really like the family that I found in band. I really like the people here. I like their attitude towards life. So I'm going to devote myself more to the band. And what I found was that, you know, there are leadership positions in band, surprisingly enough. There is a squad leader position, there's a section leader position, and there's a drum major position. And I actually tried out for the drum major position 2 times, I think, and I didn't get it either time, which, you know, big failure, and oh no, but I did get other leadership positions as well. And I think that this was also somewhat of like the perspective of my band teacher. The clarinet section, which is the instrument that I play, sort of lacked like a general leader in that sense. Like there was a whole bunch of people, but I think that he really wanted me to be on that side because I was able to provide a fresh perspective. And so I became a squad and section leader for the clarinet section. And I think that that really demonstrated I can devote myself to one activity and climb the ranks of said activity. The second thing that I really focused myself on was volunteering. So my mindset towards this was, it doesn't matter how many gifts you have if the world never really gets to feel the benefit of those gifts. So I was somewhat talented in music writing, music arranging, stuff like that. So I decided I want to volunteer. And lo and behold, MYE revealed itself. And so I ended up participating very heavily in MYE. As Grace said, I used to be vice president of the leadership committee before I graduated out. And I participated in the GST as a music teacher, and I also TA'd the music composition class at MYE. These are all sorts of things where I found what I was really talented at, what I was gifted at, and I found outlets to use that gift to benefit others. And in my opinion, that was one of the most rewarding parts of high school. Not necessarily rewarding in the sense that, wow, it looks really good on a college app, but rewarding to me, like it nurtured my soul. Like I think that when you feel that you've made a difference to however many people that are maybe halfway across the world, you really feel that you've lived a life worth living. And I think that volunteering has sort of embodied that for me. And then finally, I had tennis, and I was going to participate in tennis for all 4 years, except there ended up being a time conflict with band. So I wanted to bring this up as a lesson to you guys that it's okay to have to choose between 2 things that you really like and only picking one. It really sucked that I wasn't able to do tennis, but in the end, I still learned a lot from that club, even though I would have loved to continue. And I think that the lessons you learn from a club are not so much what is shown on a resume, but what also makes you a better person, which will indirectly benefit you in interviews and on your college app.
Yeah, and then as for me, a few things that I was really involved in, aside from obviously Science Olympiad, and the other things that I've already touched on were orchestra. My mom was a piano teacher, so I've been really involved with music as well. Actually, it was Richard's mom, Richard's piano teacher, but yeah. So basically, I started playing violin since I was in 2nd grade. It was something that I really had a lot of passion for. So just like Shuhung and Richard, I was really involved with music, but more towards the school orchestra side. I was in as many ensembles as I could be in. I participated in pit orchestra. Our school has a group called the Troy Country Fiddlers, where we perform different pop tunes and country tunes across the city. And also I was the vice president of our school's orchestra board. So that just shows like another side that I really wanted to emphasize to college applications, that I'm not just like really focused on this, all the sciencey stuff. I have other parts of me. In addition to that, my culture. My parents were from Taiwan. So that was a really big part of who I was. It was actually what one of my essays to get into the University of Michigan focused on, because that was how important it was. And I wanted to see how I could get involved with my culture. I ended up finding this organization called FASCA, and it basically focused on nurturing the Taiwanese background in Taiwanese Americans. So I became really involved with that. I did a lot of volunteering work for there, and I think it also really showed in my essay or in my application as a whole. In addition to that, I did HOSA, HOSA is actually like a medical related club. And I joined this club first when I was a sophomore, when I still wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do. So this is a good example of trying to figure out like what you really want to major in from an early point, because I realized that maybe medical stuff wasn't the wasn't the career for me, but the HOSA club at my high school consisted of over 200 students. And one of the biggest things I noticed was that it was pretty unorganized. And I wanted to do whatever I could to change that. So I figured I found some events in HOSA that kind of related to me as much as possible towards more the business side and towards more like the other STEM side and not just medical stuff. And I wanted to emphasize that and continue my involvement in the club through leadership positions, eventually becoming president. Because my dream for the club was not to use this club to nurture my interest for a major, but use it to kind of explore how far I could go as a leader and see if I could help bring this club back together. And then lastly, for robotics, this is also something that I was involved in from freshman year. And I think it's a good example of you may think that like one club may stand out to a college really well. So even if you don't like it, you just want to participate in it as much as possible so that you can write it on your college resume. So I ended up getting a student leader position my sophomore year, which is pretty early, but I just didn't feel like the whole robotics club at my school was for me. It had over 200 students as well, and it was just a really big club. It was organized, it was well run, but it just wasn't the fit for me. I didn't like being so like being such a small role in that big club. So even with my leadership position, I decided to quit the robotics club so I could focus on other things that I really liked. So I just kind of wanted to emphasize that to show that even if robotics club or something like that may look really good in college, if it's not what you like doing, even if you have a leadership position, it may not be worth it in the long run because you're just losing time that you could be focusing in other things.
Yeah, I wholly agree with what Richard and Edison just said. Now, extracurriculars are somewhat of a dense subject to get into because it quite literally is just everything you do outside of school. Now, how did I get to the ones I did? Well, piano, obviously, just because that was my main one, except I started kind of late compared to other piano people. Like, as opposed to starting at 3 or 4, I started when I was almost 9. But this, to me at least, was a huge benefit because it was something I did out of my own will. It's something I really loved, and it's something I still love to this day. And it's kind of what I brought the furthest with me along my life's journey. I said earlier, I did stuff with, I was a young scholar for the Lang Lang Foundation. And basically what this was it was an opportunity for me to kind of travel the world, performing in a lot of venues, like in Poland, in Leeds, the UK, around the US. And the reason I say this is because I think this was the main extracurricular I had that stood out for me. And I think it's a really big advantage if you find something that you're very good at and very passionate about and bring yourself very far in it, because that's what lets you stand out to colleges. In fact, Harvard has 3 essays. It has the Common App essay you do. It's got this short activities essay thing you do, and you have an optional essay. My entire optional essay was written about one of my first personal exploration into music. And so it showed how much I cared about this in my application. Second, I did a lot of student government work, as said earlier, I did it because I cared about the community I was a part of. And because of my dedication for this community, I ended up getting a leadership in student government that was vice president. And once again, this is something that sticks out to colleges because you don't just get a leadership position if you don't care about something you do, because it's a lot of work and people aren't going to let you into that leadership position if you don't put that work in. And so once again, it's really good to have these positions in college apps because it shows that it matters to you. Now, same with Asian Student Association. I was a communications director on it. And once again, it was something that mattered to me because my cultural roots mattered to me as well. I said earlier, I did a lot of hockey too because I really believe that the body and the soul are very closely related aspects of yourself. And in fact, the activities essay for my Harvard application was a short discussion of why I did hockey, why I love this so much, and why it mattered to me. And so what are these other things I've written? I wrote some more there. Well, on your Common App, you get to write down 10 activities you do. So far, I've only listed 4. But these 4 were major ones. What do you do for the rest? Well, they can just literally be things that you just care about. They don't have to be really cutthroat things that you might always think like these top applicants have. For example, I was part of my school farm for my junior and senior year because it's nice to just get out there, get your hands dirty, plant stuff, donate food to food banks that you grow. It's just something I really enjoy doing. So I did that. That was one of my activities. Another thing was community service things. As Richard said, I forgot the exact quote, my bad, but it was something to the effect of, your work doesn't matter if it doesn't like affect other people well. And so I did a lot of music-based community service like Richard. I went out and performed a lot for senior living homes, for people who don't get easy access to live music. I thought that was something that mattered. Also, I was really passionate about band as well. So that was another extracurricular thing I put there because I was the section leader for the horns and I used to play clarinet in school band as well. But that was another thing that I just cared about. It's not necessarily like, aside from your main activities you have, you can just be a person, do things that you just love and enjoy. And it shows to your admissions officer that not only are you just outstanding in a couple of things, which you can be, but you're also just a person who loves doing things, loves your life.
Yeah, and I also want to touch on something that Shuhong just said that I think is really important. Your activities list. So Common App gives you 10 different activities. So like to some people, this may be like 10 different clubs, 10 different extracurriculars, but I want to emphasize the fact that you don't have to go out of your way to join like 5 more different clubs that really have no meaning to you, that you really don't care about. I know a lot of people, and it like really works that maybe they only have like 4 different clubs at school or 4 different concrete clubs that they can talk about. But one of their activities that they listed on their Common application could just be like, oh, I go out and help my brother do something every single week, that they can label as an activity because maybe that one action really does affect them as a person and they can really convey that meaning in the description of the activity. So just remember that your activities don't have to be some concrete title. They can just be an activity that was meaningful to you throughout high school.
Yeah, and actually to throw something on top of that, you actually stole some of what I wanted to say right out of my mouth. Colleges really, really want to see a person, and I know that sort of doesn't make any sense because we are all people here, but on your application, it is really, really easy for you to sound like someone whose mother forced them to do a lot of extracurriculars. That is not who you want to be. And it's very easy for colleges to see which activities you threw on your activity list just because mom said so or just because dad said so, and which activities are on your activity list because you want them to be there. And that's because your essays are going to be about them. Your entire resume is going to be centered around some of them. And that's going to help you so much. So again, like these things like helping your brother going out and helping your brother do something every single week, that shows that you're a person. That shows that you're not just someone who's so far up in the world of academics that you can't even like pull out and breathe and do some things that are just beneficial to the world, beneficial to your family. These sort of things are the things that colleges really, really, really want to see because they see too many robots already. I already mentioned this before. They see so many robots on their application list that, you know, their essay is about whatever their mother wanted them to write about. Their activities list is whatever their dad wanted them to write about. If you can write something that you want to write about, which hopefully will come through when you do activities that you want to do, you'll really stand out on college apps.
I want to give 2 last small things about the activities portion because it's such an important part of the application process. One that is just, it's a good tip. The other that is somewhat controversial and I'm somewhat hesitant to share. But first one is when you list your activities list, you'll have it like in a list format. It's a good idea to put like the most important thing to you at like the top, and then like going from most important to least important, you can like list it like that. And the other thing is, so this might not necessarily be completely reflective of the full fleshed out applications process. But I know a lot of us here are Asian Americans, and because of lots of stereotyping and biases that happen in anywhere around the world, there are things that are advantages for us and disadvantages for us as Asian Americans. And one of the main things is in activities. There was a study where applications were given to admissions officers, and they ranked how likely they were going to enter based purely off of activities. There was a set of Asian students and a set of non-Asian students. And there are activities that are stereotypically associated with Asian students, like science Olympiad, violin or piano or instrument like that, or like swimming, things like that. And so they had applications that were Asians that did stereotypically Asian things, applications that were Asians that did stereotypically non-Asian things. And the Asians that had non-stereotypical Asian activities tended to do better. Now, I'm not telling you to not do those things that are stereotypically Asian, because if you're really passionate about those things, it will show in your app. But it is just a slight heads up for certain biases that happen in the admissions process that you should be wary of.
Thanks, guys. That's some really great advice, but we still have plenty of other topics we need to cover. And before I get started on topic number 2, I just want to remind our audience that if you have any questions throughout this seminar, just send those to the Q&A function on Zoom. They should be at the bottom of your screen. So now that you've discussed what students should be doing throughout high school in terms of things like extracurriculars, let's discuss academics. The value of standardized test scores like the SAT or ACT and a variety of other numbers such as GPA on college applications have been up for debate recently. So I'm curious to hear what you guys think about them.
Oh my goodness. It honestly frustrates me a lot because there's so much pressure on people to get a good test score. And they honestly matter way less than you think. And I know some of you guys have already heard this message before, but hear me out. I asked a U.S. admissions counselor like this exact question because I wanted to know how important is my test score. And they gave me this answer. So some of you might think that a good test score is a golden ticket into college. This is never, ever, ever true, right? The way that most colleges interpret test scores is as a cutoff. So I pulled up UMich here because it's probably a college that many of us here in Michigan are going to be applying to. And I'm showing you the average score here. So looking at this average score, you can see that roughly the middle 50%, so from the 25% to 75% quartile. The average scores caps at a 1500 SAT and a 33 ACT. Now those are some pretty dang good scores. But if you get higher than a 33 or if you get higher than a 1500, you are technically in the top 25% of applicants that apply to UMich. Yeah, you guys are probably saying, well, I know some kids who have like really great scores, like they have something that's higher than a 1500 and they didn't get in. How does that work? That's because these scores are simply generally cutoffs, right? The way that UMich works is that they'll look at your scores, and if your score is way, way, way below these cutoffs, they don't think that you're actually academically suitable enough for this college. And now that might suck to hear, but that's genuinely true. And UMich's entire like program is super duper competitive and super duper difficult. So if you don't have these scores, they also look at your GPA, which I'll talk about later. If you don't have these scores in GPA, they probably just think you're not quite academically there to get in, which is totally fine. But on the flip side, if your score is above, just because you're academically qualified does not mean like you're culturally qualified, or culturally qualified sounds bad, but like you're culturally suitable, like like the way that you think doesn't mesh with the way that UMich thinks or something like that. These are all other things that they have to take into consideration. So it obviously won't hurt you if you have a 36, right? Like, in fact, it'll be really beneficial for you if you have a 35 or 36, because that demonstrates that you're like the top 99% quartile in terms of academic achievement generally. Like, it definitely won't hurt you. So don't like stop studying for the SAT or ACT because this one guy on a panel told you to. I'm not telling you to stop studying for it, but I am telling you not to stress out if your score is not a 1600 or 36. It honestly does not make as much of a difference as you think. In fact, what matters way, way, way more is your GPA and your class difficulty. So colleges don't just evaluate your GPA because that's not fair to the students who take difficult classes and don't get perfect scores in them. So they consider two things because they get a look at your full resume. How difficult were the classes you took? What were your grade in those classes? So if you have a 4.0 with like all AP courses, they're going to be like, okay, this guy's kind of crazy. If you have a 4.0 with all regular courses, they're going to be like, he's not bad, but I would have liked to see him challenge himself more. And that's like basically the exact mindset that these colleges have, right? So if you are able to take difficult classes and do well in them, which will probably only happen if you're genuinely passionate about whatever subject the class is in, it'll look way better on your application than a sweet 1550 or a nice 35 ACT, something like that.
Yeah, and to kind of add on to what he mentioned earlier about the whole class choices thing. So for most schools, they use the AP system, which is provided by College Board. So I know a lot of you guys that are in high school right now are probably stressing out about like, oh, how many APs should I take? Should I take this AP or not? So the way I like to think about it is that there are mainly two different types or two different sides of AP courses that you can look at with. So the first type is GPA boosting. This is a type that a lot of people kind of utilize. Basically, some schools have like really easy APs, or like maybe the teacher takes it easier on the students. So, and then you hear around from other students that have already graduated, maybe that like this class is an easy A or something like that. So a lot of people utilize this and they take that AP class just to get that easy A and kind of raise their GPA a little, while to colleges, it looks nice because you see an AP and you see an A. But then on the other side, you want to think about the APs that you will take for college credit. So this might not really occur until your junior or senior year, but a lot of different colleges have different AP requirements and AP credits. Like some colleges may not take any AP credits at all. Some colleges may take a lot, but most colleges are somewhere in the middle. So you kind of want to look at that chart. They usually have a chart that you can find if you just search it online. And you want to look at maybe towards your like career, your major oriented courses that you're going to have to require. Say like you want to go into computer science, then it may be beneficial for you to take AP computer science in high school if they give you credit for getting a 4 or 5 on that AP computer science exam, because it'll just be easier for you once you get into college. Like for me, for example, I took 13 APs in high school. Some of these were GPA boosting, some of these were college credits. And just after I committed to UMich, I had this AP credit conversion chart. And I figured out that all of my APs that that I took and got the scores of, they give me around 49 credits going into the University of Michigan. But only a portion of these credits really matter for my major. For example, I took AP psychology. Like that, I'm majoring in computer science and business. That really has no effect on my college career. So that's an example of a more GPA boosting AP. But then I also took AP calculus. That has helped me get credit for 2 calculus classes at the University of Michigan. So it just kind of depends on what APs you want to take that may be just to kind of boost your GPA, or you want to look at the APs that will give you the college credit. So there's just kind of 2 sides that I feel are 2 APs.
Yeah, and I would like to add a little disclaimer, because we are all saying this from a position of like, our scores don't look that bad, right? Like I will be kind of frank when I say that our scores look pretty dang nice. So do take what we say with a grain of salt, but in all honesty, I did ask a UMich admissions counselor what they thought about this, because I was, just wondering, like, does my 36 ACT actually like guarantee me a ticket into UMich, as I've heard before? And she told me, no, it matters way more what the rest of your application looks like. So that would be what my focus is on. And when it comes to SAT and ACT prep, my unpopular opinion is that like all these prep classes that you see going around, they don't actually matter that much, because all these prep classes do is they lock you in a room with like 15 other people in like a really air conditioned and cold room, and then you just do tests until you want to pass out. And this is a very viable, very effective prep strategy because the SAT and the ACT are somewhat formulaic. If you can pick up on that formula, you'll be able to raise your score really quickly. So I did take a prep course. I don't think it would have mattered if I had just had the discipline to sit down myself and do these tests, because that's what I ended up doing before I took the SAT anyways. So if you're able to have that sort of discipline, Khan Academy gives you great free prep, and you'll be able to like prepare for these without having to shell out hundreds of dollars for these, in my opinion, not so beneficial prep classes.
All right, so subject tests. Subject tests are something that you're probably going to have to consider, especially if you're trying out for a very selective school, because a lot of them require at least 2 subject tests. Now, you might wonder what kind of subject tests should you take, because there are a huge variety of them. Definitely take Math 2. Pretty much every single college that requires your subject test will require the Math 2. Also, if you are doing fine in math classes, you'll probably be fine for Math 2 as well. Now, the other one is a whole different matter because there are a lot to choose from. Once again, there's a bunch of STEM ones and there's a bunch of humanities ones. Now, why did I pick world history as mine? While world history, people tend to score lower and it's not as common. Well, once again, as an IB student and speaking to all the IB students in the audience, IB does not prepare you for subject tests at all, because subject tests, these tests are run by the College Board, which runs AP, and so those two are more linked. IB is a whole separate organization, and so the curriculums don't match. If you are to choose a subject test and you want to do a STEM one, chances are you're just going to have to study on your own. If you want to do bio, you're probably going to have to pick up one of the bio study books. If you're going to do world history, you're going to have to do one of the world history study books like I did. I just had to read through the entire thing, try to memorize it, go test, hope for the best. Now, there are some tips I can give to studying. What I've noticed, especially with talking to a lot of friends, is that a lot of people seem to prefer those Barron's study books over Princeton Review, because I've heard a lot of people talk about, especially in bio and world history, which I took, that Princeton Review skims out on some of the content that you need to know. Like, after I read through the Princeton Review book, I took some practice tests and noticed that some content of the questions straight up was not in the book. So then I had to read through the entire Barron's one, and that covered the rest of the knowledge I needed. Now, I don't know if this applies outside of bio and world history, but it's something that you should be wary of. Now, if you are fortunate enough to be taking the AP exam, which is such a weird thing to say, fortunate enough, if you know the content for those AP courses, it pretty much you need. There will be some extra info that they chuck into those subject tests, but once you get those, you should be fine. And then one final thing about subject tests is that the scoring on those is a little different from the normal SAT. So the subject tests, depending on which one you take, I think ranges anywhere from 50 to 100 questions. I'll speak on world history since that's the one I took. There were 60 questions in it. You could actually get about 5 or 6 questions wrong and still get a perfect 800 score, just because they know that subject tests cover knowledge that's way beyond some stuff that's taught in school. And so keep that in mind when you're thinking about how to ration out your study times. And pick a subject that you know well. Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of to add on to that, my advice is that if you are taking a related advanced course in your high school, such as AP Chemistry or maybe the IB equivalent of that, I think that it's most beneficial to take your related subject test as soon as you can, right after you finish taking that course. For me, I took AP Chemistry my sophomore year. So that the June of my sophomore year, I took the chemistry subject test. And it's the most effective because it's pretty much right after you take the AP test and all the information is still fresh in your mind. A lot of subject tests do have more information than both AP and IB teach too. So you're gonna have to do some self-studying as well. But in general, it's best to take your related subject test right after you take that course in school so that you can reduce the workload, reduce the amount of stress that you're gonna have to go through.
So thanks, guys. Now, a question that is certainly on the minds of probably all the juniors in our audience and also myself. How do you figure out college apps? College apps seem like this massive obstacle, and it's hard to know where to begin. Something that I've definitely struggled with is deciding between early and regular applications. Could you guys tell us more about your experiences and takeaways?
Yeah. So to start off, I kind of want to go over the different types of early admissions. So there are two main types of college admissions in general. There are early decisions and regular admissions. So basically, there are three main types of early admissions, as you can see on this graphic that's being shown right now. The first one is early decision, and that is you can only submit one early decision application to a school. And if you are accepted through that early decision cycle, you like are legally obliged to go. You have to go unless you have some extenuating like financial circumstances or anything else that make you like not able to go. But in general, if you apply to an early decision school and you are accepted, that is a school that you're going to go to. And then there's also early action. So early action is the more common one. University of Michigan is a good example of this. So you can submit as many early action applications as you want to all those colleges. And basically the point of early action is just if you know that you like this college, if you know you want to go to this college, then you can apply to it. But it is non-restricting. So if you do get into that college, you are not like legally obliged to have to go to that, but you do have that as an option. And then the third one, the main one, is restrictive early action, which is similar to early decision in that you can only submit one restrictive early application to a certain college, but it's not as restricting. Same thing as early action. If you get in, you don't have to go, but you can only apply to one type of REA school. And then some colleges also have rolling admissions, which is basically they take applications on a rolling basis. The earlier you apply, the better chance you have to get in. But there's no like hard deadline throughout the year. And then, so this is on the topic more of early versus regular applications. My advice is that if you have a dream college in mind and they offer early admissions, apply to it. If you have the time and the resources that you think will give you a really good application, just apply to it early. This way, it'll reduce a lot of stress when you're in the regular cycle, which I'll talk more about later. But second thing is, I would advise you to basically only apply to the colleges that you would 100% attend if accepted, that you could actually genuinely see yourself on that campus and enjoying it and having a good time. Now, this means that a lot of people kind of start off their college list by looking at something like a US News list, where it kind of gives you the rankings of all of the colleges or all of the programs that you want. So my outlook on this is that I picked all my colleges basically based on the programs that they offered. I was interested in both computer science, business. So I looked at schools that had strong programs like that, that also catered to my interests. Not just looking at like, oh, these top 3 schools that I have to apply to just because they're labeled number 1, number 2, number 3. It's also really important to remember that quality is better than quantity. It's better to apply to, say, 3 early colleges that you're really interested in that have really good, well-rounded, well-thought-out applications, as opposed to like 7 or 8 colleges that you just kind of gloss over each application. You copy-paste essays that you really don't change to fit the specific college. And then going back to kind of applying to your dream college early, or applying to colleges that you can actually see yourself going to early. This way, if you are accepted in that early cycle, it relieves a lot of stress when you apply to school as your regular decision, because you know that you have that backup college that you're already accepted into. You have that standard to kind of compare yourself to. For me, like I was accepted into the University of Michigan early. So when I was applying to all my schools regular decision, I only applied to a few schools as opposed to like applying to a lot, because I thought to myself, like, I'm going to apply to this school regular decision, but if I were accepted, would I really go to that school over the University of Michigan, which I'm already accepted into? So if I didn't apply to University of Michigan early, I would have applied to a lot more schools, which would have stressed me out a lot more, given me a lot more workload, because I can tell myself that piece of advice, like, would I go to this college over another college, because I haven't been accepted into any yet.
Yeah, and speaking more on that subject, like even if your dream college does not have an early application process, like for instance, mine, Olin College of Engineering, doesn't have an early application process because there's like this thing called a candidates weekend, and that's a whole nother thing, can of worms that we don't have to get into. But basically, it didn't have an early application process. In that case, I couldn't apply to any restrictive early action or early decision applications in the early cycle. But colleges like the University of Michigan, and then there was WPI over in Boston. These were colleges that I could still apply to, and I definitely still recommend applying early, even if none of these schools are your dream college, because again, relieving stress and stuff like that, that's so important. But for the parents in the audience here, the financial burden that can be lifted is like not minuscule. I mean, if you don't get accepted into any colleges during the early action cycle, so like say you apply to 4 colleges and you didn't get accepted to any of them in the early action cycle. I mean, your college list for the regular cycle might now go from 3 colleges, which were your only 3 dream colleges better than one of the early colleges that you had before, to 10 colleges. And each of those colleges may have an $80 or $100 application fee. And like, not only that, but each of them might have extra essays that your student's going to need to write, more frustration for both of you. These are all things that can easily be avoided if you just take care of those early apps earlier.
Yeah, I'd like to speak on this from a perspective of someone who might have not necessarily handled this the best I could have. So the summer of my, in between junior and senior year for me was just packed with a lot of piano stuff. So I actually didn't do any early applications since I didn't have any time to work on them until school started. But once school started, I had all this IB stuff due. Now, I would definitely recommend doing as many earlies as you can for a number of reasons. First, it'll help you ration out your time better because you'll be able to do some stuff for early, and then the ones you want to do regular, you can just save it for that portion of time. Now, the main thing that I'd like to stress is the feeling of security, because college is how you're going to spend your next 4 years. If you don't know where you're going, or if you don't even know that you're going at all, you are going to be stressed out. Like for me, since I didn't do any earlies, I didn't get any feedback about how I was doing until I got a likely letter in like early February. Till then, until I got that letter, I read the entire time about whether I was going to have a place to be. And even with the likely letter, it's like I wasn't 100% sure what a likely letter was at the time. So I still wasn't even sure whether I'll be going to college yet. But yeah, so do whenever you can, do what Richard and Edison said about being able to like focus on the school that you really.
Okay, I think Shuhong is maybe having some Wi-Fi connectivity issues. So I think we're just going to move on for the time being and get into essays. As we all know, essays are some of the most important parts of your application, and they're also very anxiety-inducing. So I think our entire audience would like to hear your guys' feedback on how to get started on these essays.
Yes, so essays are actually really important because they're the part of the application that are entirely personalized to you, right? So your first Common App essay, the one that everyone stresses out about, that essay one of the options, like one of the prompts for that essay is literally just write something. So this is where you can show who you are, what your personality is, what your dreams are, what your aspirations are, what your family's like, anything you want to show to the application reader. And this is, when we go back to what I said before, which is college application readers want to see a person. Essays are the part where you really explore that aspect of you that makes you a person. So make sure you pay extreme attention to writing these essays and make sure that everything said in there is entirely you. Because if you're not you on your college application, then the college is accepting a different version of you that might not be who you really are might not make you a good fit on their campus, and a whole bunch of other things.
Yeah, and I just really want to emphasize the point that the earlier you start your essays, the better. Because you'll have more time to think about it, more time to wonder whether or not you really want to talk about this topic. On top of that, on the other hand, you also don't want to rush into a topic you aren't completely sure of just for the sake of like having to be able to start your essays early. For me, I was thinking about whatever topics I want to talk about since like the end of my junior year, but I couldn't really figure out the exact topic I wanted to talk about until like late July. And I actually figured out what I want to talk about on a road trip back to my house from the Smoky Mountains. It just kind of hit me. So like just emphasize that you really don't want to rush into anything. You kind of just wait for the right topic to kind of pop in your head, right idea to pop in your head that you're really passionate and that you really want to talk about in your college application. Additionally, sometimes the more specific moments that you have in your essay, the more meaning it has. So like if you think about it, an essay that just talks about someone's like 4 years in high school and like what they did might not have the same meaning as if you really zoom in to that one specific moment you had sophomore year that kind of shaped how you are. It was like an aha moment that really just inspired you or changed the way you think about life. That might be more meaningful to talk about in your essay rather than just talk about how you did something for 4 years. And then lastly, you really want to avoid fluff in your essays. So fluff is basically just random words that you add into your sentences, either to up the word count so that you can act like you wrote more, or just to kind of make yourself sound more sophisticated. However, all of these college admissions officers have read millions of essays. They know when a student is writing a word just for the sake of writing it, and they can read straight through that. So basically, my advice to this is that every single word on your essay should be essential to the meaning. Like if you look at any sentence that you've written, if you take out a word out of that sentence, will it still have that same meaning that you want to imply? Like, does it still make sense? If the answer is no, that like even if you take out a word, then the sentence still basically means the same thing. You might want to consider maybe getting rid of it or maybe rewriting the sentence so that it really holds as much meaning as possible. Because the college admission officers can read right through your fluff.
Yeah, and sort of touching upon that, where this sort of really comes into play is like with adjectives. So if you say stuff like the humongous big sheep, those two words mean the exact same thing, and you're just padding the word count, stuff like that. I mean, like, obviously that's a comical example, right? But you will find yourself making those sorts of mistakes very, very often on your essay because you just want to like blow everything up. So you'll add an unnecessary amount of adjectives. But remember, these essays are honestly less of an essay and more of a story because stories are the way that people really get to know who you are. So don't consider these things as like, oh, this big essay that I need to write that really details who I am and shows who I am in the best light. In fact, what I would recommend is that you keep a journal. And that's because my biggest piece of advice on college essays is for you to be genuine and for you to be vulnerable. What that means is you should be real. You shouldn't create a fake version of yourself that you think colleges want to see, because whatever you think that fake version is, the answer is no. And you want to be vulnerable, which means you want to give them a peek inside your life that is not surface level, right? You don't want to talk to them about that one time you got a red fire truck for your like 3rd birthday or something like that, unless that birthday has a deeper meaning to you. You want to talk to them about sometime, like, for instance, when you failed, right? When you felt like you were one man against the entire world and you couldn't succeed. Or you want to talk to them about that one time where you broke through all the odds and you did succeed. Or you want to talk to them about that one time where you were speaking with like some person and they gave you fresh insight on a problem and you realized how important it was to work with people. Like all of these sorts of things where you can actually draw a lesson from a moment in your life, that's the most important. And the reason I say keep a journal then is so that you can remember back onto these vulnerable moments, these genuine moments, the clearest. And then, of course, don't be scared of multiple drafts. So I'm going to give you guys a little peek into what my Google Drive for my college app essay looked like. You can see that there are a lot of documents in there. In fact, there are 15 in this folder, which is my drafts folder. And then there were 5 more in another folder that I called final draft. You know, the 5 final drafts that I had. I started my first essay on July 31st, 2019. It was about some topic about like this concrete parking structure that I used to go to a lot called Red Effect. That was what my first essay was about. And then my last essay ended up being about me not making it into drum major, like not getting drum major when I really, really wanted to. So you can see how the perspectives changed so greatly. But like, I think the most important part that this shows is that you should not be scared of multiple drafts. In fact, I know people whose folders are like this, except multiplied by 2 or multiplied by 3. Like there are people who just cannot settle down on an idea. And if you can't, don't worry about it. Eventually you will. Eventually you'll find something that will click for you, as long as you keep trying at it. I mean, if you just write one essay and you're like, whatever, who cares? Then yeah, sure, it's not going to be there. But if you really, really try at it, you're eventually going to find something that clicks with who you are as a person. And that's really what your goal is. You want an essay that will resonate with yourself first, because that's going to be what resonates with college admissions officers. So yeah, nobody knows what the perfect formula for a good essay is. So don't trust anyone who says that they do. Not even college application officers know what the perfect formula is. They don't know if it's a failure story or if it's like an old person story. No one knows. So it has to be personal to you. It has to have a meaning to you first, and then it'll have a meaning to everyone else. So I'm going to give you a little excerpt from my essay. As I said, it was about the drum major auditions. I started it with a literal excerpt from my journal. So it goes, my journal entry from June 4th, 2018 reads as follows. It still hurts. I don't know how to express it, but I'm not going to tell myself it'll be better, and I'm not going to dull the pain or repress it. I'm not going to be the next assistant drum major for marching band. And reading that, like, you sort of get the impression like, oh my God, this kid, like, he's just going to be like ragging on himself about how he's a failure the entire time. Like, colleges don't want to see that. Colleges want to see you in the best light. That is absolutely not true, because I guess this essay got me into college some places. This essay sort of touched upon when I broke down my own ego. So I had like a really big ego where I believed that I was the protagonist of my own story, and no one could ever break me down and no one could ever stop me. You know, all those like feel good songs, like this is my fight song, we can do it. I bought into all of that. And then finally I failed like really horribly at something I really, really tried at. And that I extrapolated that into a lesson, a greater lesson about my fragility and my ego. So that was like a moment where I failed, but I still wrote an entire essay about it, even though it might not have looked attractive on the surface. And I think that what this demonstrated was that I had the ability to recognize my failure. I had the ability to recognize my mistakes and rectify it. And I think that was actually really attractive to college application officers.
Yeah. Okay. So next, I'm also going to be sharing a little snippet of my college application essay. This is from my Common App and the introduction of it. Nice to meet you. I'm the ponytail kid everyone talks about. That's how I used to greet my new classmates every year. As the introduction suggests, I had a little strand of hair sprouting from the back of my head for the first 14 years of my life. It was a result of an early childhood haircut. I wouldn't sit still, so I ended up growing a missed spot out. Every September, my teachers and classmates always remembered me first. A perk that comes with having a ponytail, I suppose. So for this essay, if you didn't understand it from the excerpt, basically I had a really crazy hairstyle for the first 14 years of my life. I had a ponytail basically coming out from the back of my head, and it really helped me stand out in basically everything I did. And then in this essay, I talked about how I finally had made the decision to cut it and how that affected me as a person, how that changed my outlook on life, because after I cut it, people started treating me differently, or at least I thought that they did. And then the way that people greeted me, the way that people remembered me, everything changed. So I talked about how that kind of shaped me as an individual going onward from that. And also I started my essay with basically a piece of dialogue. And I think that way it kind of breaks down the barrier between you and the college admission officers to change it from just an essay, just like a block of text, to like an actual conversation that you're having with them. It gives you like this look, it gives them this look into your personal life, into what you actually said. And then another place in my essay, I included a really specific date, kind of just like how Richard did with his journal draft. I think that really helps to emphasize how big that moment is, how it stands out, and you can remember that specific moment in your own brain. And then by kind of putting that down in paper with like specific dates or specific numbers, it kind of gets that message through to the college admissions too.
All right, so I spent a lot of time thinking about my essay, because the essay is the one portion of your essay I meant for your application, where you can actually show who you are as a person. It's really your own voice. The other parts of your application are just statistics, lists of activities, personal information. This is the one spot where you can actually show who you are with your own words. So make sure the writing style you use is uniquely your own. It shouldn't, don't try to be too formal. Don't try to act like someone you're not. As Richard said, just be who you are. Almost write how you speak. Obviously not to that extent because grammar errors and such, but it should be personal. And so there were a lot of tips that helped me along the way when thinking of not just what to write, but how to write it. And I think the main ones I got out were focus on what's personal to you, not what's academic, because everywhere else in your application is just your academic achievements, your extracurricular achievements. Do something that is a part of your life that was outside of school. Second, you should paint a whole picture of yourself, a person of yourself in your totality, as hard as that is, in a short 600 words. Now, my essay was about my relationship with my grandfather, who had a big impact on me. Now, the reason why I say this is because it's really easy to just write this essay about my grandfather. It would have been really easy to fall into the trap of just explaining who he was, explaining our interaction. But since your essay should be about you, I talked about how he affected me. So everything about your essay should ultimately come down to who you are as a person. Thirdly, when you think about your topic that you want to choose as a whole, you should think very broadly on your experiences, not just what you've done in your high school year. Think from your very first memories until now. Because like my essay, I met my grandfather way young when I was like, I can't even remember, it was that long ago, but it was from all the way that long, all the way till now. So think very broadly on your experiences. As Edison said earlier, is that you should be very descriptive and specific with the instance you choose. Although I talk about a long period of time, I choose little anecdotes that happened in the course of these like 15 years. And I think what Richard said earlier, which was also really good, is that this should be a story, not just an essay. You should narrate, not summarize things. Narrating your point of view helps engage your admissions officer a lot better, because it's like if you were to read a textbook as opposed to reading a novel, which one would you prefer more? Obviously the novel. It's a story. It's not dry. It's not boring. Now, finally, the hardest one to do, I think, but the one that you'll hear a lot and is probably most beneficial, is that your essay should show, not tell the admissions officer what you're trying to do. Now, what do I mean by this? I mean, like, your essay shouldn't be like one of those Aesop fables where they just directly at the end tell you, oh, don't steal, or, oh, jealous people are angry, or whatever. This should be apparent, and this theme should permeate through all your words in your essay to the point that you don't have to tell them anything. You're just telling them a story. And so the little excerpt from my essay I chose was, I think, an example of this show, don't tell, since it's a really difficult thing to illustrate. Now, in my essay, I talk, as I said earlier, about my relationship with my grandfather and how he shaped me as a person. Now, I decided this premise would be a good show, don't tell kind of thing, because I don't tell people how I am as a person. I show them through my interaction with my grandfather and the things that he taught me. One of the main messages I have going through this is about my approach to learning and my approach to challenges in life as a whole. And it's illustrated in these two passages. I think the top paragraph, the top excerpt you see is in like the third paragraph. The bottom excerpt, I think, is somewhere in like the sixth. Anyways, the point is they are in separate parts of the essay so that the whole essay is like cohesive. It's not sectional. So in the first part, I'm a child, I'm in China. I used to love folding origami a lot, but at one point I got really frustrated with this one model I couldn't make. So starting here, Gong Gong calmly picked up the paper and sat down with me. And he told me, A great chef once received a huge order from a very wealthy group of people, he thoughtfully said. They demanded that the food arrive quickly. All the cooks worked frantically, almost tripping over each other. It was a mess. The chef called out to everyone, "Slow down," and the cooks listened and successfully delivered the food on time. The guests left the restaurant satisfied. Many childhood memories have faded over time, but I'll never forget Gong Gong's own adage: have patience, slow down, and you'll learn fast. And then fast forward a couple years, fast forward a couple paragraphs in the essay, I picked up piano, and I started rather late, but I caught up quickly. And how did I? Well, I was asked to share the secret of how I learned so quickly to the rest of my piano classmates. And my answer was simple: have patience, slow down, and you'll learn fast. The wisdom I learned from Gongo, my grandfather. Now, this I think was a good example of that show don't tell principle, because I'm not telling people like, this is how I am. This is my approach to things. This is how I applied it. It wasn't subtly per se, but it was incorporated into the kind of fabric of the story of my essay. And that kind of thing, these like tying together disparate points of your essay, is I think the best way to do this show don't tell kind of thing.
Okay.
We all know how expensive college is becoming these days. So could you guys share some advice on applying for scholarships?
Yeah, so scholarships are something that kind of had a big impact on my college application decision. So to start off, I know you guys haven't experienced this yet, but after you write all of these drafts, all of these essays for these colleges, it can be really easy to burn out. It can be really tempting to just kind of drop everything, just have fun, make the best out of the rest of your senior year with your friends, and just basically not care about this whole college stuff anymore until like decision day. However, scholarships can actually make or break a decision quite often, because some people may think that it's more worth it to attend a college that is really low cost, that may not have the best program compared to another college that costs like $80,000 a year. And to kind of help to get this, to prevent everyone from burning out, my piece of advice is that you want to reuse and recycle your scholarship applications, because the difference they are from college applications is that scholarships are generally a lot smaller. They only require like 1 or 2 essays, and they're usually not that long either. And they basically focus on most of the same things. They're not as like completely, they don't want to know as much about you usually as college applications do. So it can be a lot easier to kind of write like a few different topics for these scholarships that some of them may ask you like how you want to use this money for your future, or some of you may ask like other similar questions. So you can use these different types of topics for multiple scholarship applications, and that will help you a lot, relieve a lot of stress. And here are some examples of scholarships that you can look for. One of the key ones is national merit. So basically the first round of it is determined your junior year taking the PSAT. Basically, if you have a score above the cutoff, you're automatically considered a national merit semifinalist. And then after that, you will submit an application that will hopefully bring you to a finalist, and then finally a national merit recipient. And these scholarships are usually $2,500. Sometimes if your like parent works for a specific company or something like that, or if you have any other circumstances, you may get different scholarships, but the most common one is just the National Merit $2,500 scholarship. And that's just one example of a scholarship that you can get. It's pretty easy to find a lot more scholarships. A lot of the times, if you get accepted into a school, they'll send you a bunch of emails about types of scholarships that you can apply to. For example, after I was accepted into UMich, they sent me a bunch of different scholarships that I definitely applied to. And then also there's field-based scholarships, like, for example, if you're really interested in music or if you're really interested in STEM, you can find different scholarships if you just like search them online that have to do with that. And then you can easily verify if the scholarships are actually legit through other searches, through services like Reddit and other stuff like that. And then finally, there's national organizations. For example, Science Olympiad, I'm pretty sure they have a few scholarships too. So even though your club may only be related to that, your specific school, the national board behind that organization probably has a lot of scholarships. And just remember, don't be afraid to apply to scholarships, even if you don't think you're as qualified as other applicants. it can only be beneficial to apply to these scholarships. I applied to a lot of my scholarships basically after an orchestra concert at like 11 p.m. I initially wasn't going to do it. I was the same thing. I was burned out. I was tired. I was like, I already got into the University of Michigan. So why do I need to keep on applying to other things such as scholarships? But I pushed through it. I ended up applying to a bunch of scholarships that night. And I basically, as a result, I'm virtually paying no tuition for the University of Michigan. So that's just an example of how scholarships are super important, and that even if you feel really tired and burned out, you should still definitely consider applying to as many as you can.
All right, well, thank you guys so much for your advice on scholarships and essays. So beyond essays and scholarships, many prestigious colleges, which I know probably a lot of our audience members will be applying to, require interviews from their applicants. So how would you suggest that we tackle those?
Yeah, so I know interviews can be a really nerve-wracking part of the application process because it's not always easy to just sit down in a one-on-one conversation. Sometimes with even your friends, that's difficult. Now think about that with this adult that you don't even know who they are. They're from some big they're alumni of some big college, the one you're thinking of going to, and they're about to judge you for everything you say. I'd say don't worry, but that's bad advice because it's hard not to worry. I was fortunate enough to be like a rather sociable person, so it wasn't too bad. But there are some things I can say that will be really helpful. First, they're not judging you as hard as you think they are. A lot of the interview process is just to confirm that you are similar to the person that you've put on your application, and just to get to know you better. There's some interviews, as long as you don't say anything just outright crazy, it won't harm you that much because a lot of interviews aren't terribly important to the application process, which is why a lot of the interviews for schools are even optional. But with regards to conducting the interview itself, I remember advice that was really beneficial for me, surprisingly taking it out of Shunz's Art of War, was something to the effect of know yourself, know the enemy, and you will not have to fear winning 100 battles. Now, this can be applied to this interview process, but much less militantly. If you know yourself and you know the college you're applying for, you will know why you are valuable to the college you're applying for and why they would want to accept you to the school. Now, with this mindset, you'll know where to steer these conversations because you'll know how to present yourself in a good light for that college you want to be going to. Now, about interviews themselves, colleges seem to conduct interviews pretty differently. For the Ivy League interviews I had, they were all like super open-ended. They just opened up with either tell me about yourself or what do you want to talk about? So for those, I just talked about music because I know that is my strongest suit and that is what I care about most, and that's what I can talk hours about. So I just for the question that was, what do you want to talk about? I asked the question back, what kind of music do you listen to? And naturally, our conversation steered from there. Every once in a while, when it died out a bit, the interviewer would ask some more school-specific ones. Now, my Rice interview was a little different. I think a lot of other schools conducted this way, where the interviewer has a set few questions to ask, and they'll typically be to the effect of like, what were your favorite classes in high school? Why are you applying to Rice? What specifically about Rice attracted you? School attracted you? And so you once again, this goes back to know yourself, know what you've loved, know what you didn't like, know what you're strong at, know what you're weak at, and know the cause you're applying for. Know what programs they have to offer. Know why you care about that school. And if you have this knowledge, these 3 basic points, your interviews will be fine, given that just raise your chin, relax, calm down a bit, drink some tea or something. A lot of them are at cafes, so that'll be very convenient, and you'll be good. Just try having a conversation.
Yeah, and you guys should all remember too that as much as the college application process is the college analyzing you to see if you're fit for going there, it's equal parts you analyzing the college to see if you're fit for going there. So sometimes colleges will even do this thing where, like as I said before, they'll look at you and say, I don't know if this guy's like ambitions necessarily fit with what our school is able to provide or what our school is looking for in an applicant. So we'll reject someone who's fully qualified or even overqualified just because we don't believe that they'll ever come here, because we can't imagine them at this school. So you should also probably be doing that, especially at an interview, because you'll be speaking with generally an alumni. They'll be able to tell you, like when they say, do you have any questions for me? Ask them, like, what's the culture like? Like, if you haven't visited campus yet, what's the culture like? What did the students there like to do? What are the best clubs on the campus? Like, if you're really into football, how's the football team? Oh, you should probably know the statistics if you're really into football. But like that sort of thing, these are all the things that you should be figuring out from the application so that it's not just a one-way interview. It's technically a two-way interview. And although it won't feel that way on the spot, know that you are making an evaluation of this college to see if this is where you want to go. Don't settle for any college well, that's interesting to say. Settle for like a better college because everyone tells you that it's better. You should go to the college that will provide you the best education, that will allow you to thrive the best, because, I mean, that's really the goal.
Yeah, and kind of to emphasize what he said earlier about when the interviewer asks you if you have any questions for them, basically you always want to have some questions prepared to ask them. This shows that you're really interested. Like, even if you've done so much research into that college, you know.
Okay, I think Edison is also having some Wi-Fi issues. Okay, yeah, he
Yeah, I
just
think.
unfroze. So Eddie, if you'd like to pick up where you left off, feel
Yeah,
free.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure. Okay, yeah, so basically, what I wanted to say was that if a college interviewer asks you if you have any questions for them, you always want to ask them a question. Even if you've done so much research on the school and you know like everything about it, it's really important to ask the question. That way the interviewer knows that you genuinely want to know more about the campus. And then on top of that, Shuhung mentioned something earlier about how some college interviews are optional. I would still recommend you to always accept these interview invitations, even if you are really nervous about it and aren't really confident. I was one of these people. I was really nervous for some of my interviews, but ultimately, when you accept the invitation, it already shows the college that you are interested and you want to know more about it. And then because I was kind of nervous about this stuff, I did some researching beforehand too. And a lot of these college admission officers on websites like Quora and Reddit, they all answer to these people that have concerns. They always say like, interviews can only be good for you. Even if you think you absolutely failed it, even if you were stuttering left and right and you were a nervous wreck, like it can only benefit you. They won't detract points from your application if you have a bad interview.
Now, just to close this kind of how it's so much we've talked about, but just to kind of wrap everything up into a nice little knot. The application, remember, every admissions, you might have multiple admissions officers reading your application, but every admission officer will read your entire application. This means your application will be reviewed holistically. Everything will meld together to paint a picture of who you are, and not just as a student, but as a person. So make sure that your application is consistent with who you are. Take a look at your entire application and see if it really paints a picture of you as a person. Like my application, it was very much proportional to how I am as a person. Most of it was discussing my piano and music related activities. Some of it was on student government and hockey, and the rest was the rest of my interests. So it shows, it's hard to explain, but it really shows who I was as a student, and it's a really detailed picture of who I was. Remember that often in these situations, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Sometimes your test scores might be lower, but it can be easily raised up if you are very exceptional in, say, like Science Olympiad. Sometimes your extracurriculars may be lacking in diversity, but it will show in how deep you've gone with them.
Yeah, and that's honestly the truth about college applications that most people don't think about. Like, there are all these people who say they got all the tips and tricks to how to get into college, but the truth of the matter is that colleges also have like a sort of demographic that they're looking to select. So even if they get 1 million qualified applicants from one certain demographic, whether that be gender or like country, like state or something like that. Once they have all of those selected, unfortunately, they probably won't be selecting anymore. So as much as like you can prepare for college, like honestly, the best advice that we can give you is to make yourself an exceptional person. Like whatever you think an exceptional person is, become that, because that's your best shot. And after that, it's just a lottery. And honestly, it's a lottery that you honestly have a pretty good chance of winning if you are an exceptional person.
And to kind of add on to that, I think it's important to remember that colleges are they're trying to create, obviously they emphasize the fact of being well-rounded, but ultimately they're looking to create a well-rounded class more than accept a whole class of well-rounded individuals. So taking that into mind, when you write your application, you don't want to seem that like, oh, wow, you do everything and you're so well-rounded. It can be beneficial to emphasize a specific thing that you're focused on, such as like if you're focused on music, like Shuhong was. So it's better to kind of emphasize your own passions, even if you don't think that it gives you the most well-rounded outlook to the colleges. The colleges are looking for people that have specific talents that will create a well-rounded class, not a well-rounded person.
All right, so thank you guys so much for talking with me today. That's all I wanted to ask you. So now we have a few questions that have been gathered in our Q&A box throughout the seminar that we could just start by asking. So the first question is, some students hire consultants to help them polish their applications. What are your thoughts on these consultants, and did you guys hire ones?
I did not hire one. I didn't think I needed one. Often consultants won't know you as well as you know yourself. So a good review of your application should be sufficient. However, consultants, if there's someone you know and they know you, they sometimes can be really beneficial, but at the same time, they are pricey. And some of it really highlights a lot of the socioeconomic discrepancies that a lot of families face in the college application process. And it's something that I don't always support, since it's already such an unfair process. Like, why do that sometimes? But yeah, if it's something that you really think is necessary, go ahead. But most of the time, like 90% of the times, you know yourself, you know your application better than anybody else. A consultant might change it to be a person that you aren't.
Yeah, and kind of to add on, while it's certainly up to the individual's decision whether or not they want to hire a consultant, whether or not they think it's beneficial, I think one thing that you want to keep in mind is that you want to make sure that you keep as much of yourself as possible when you're starting your application. Even if your consultant may say like, oh, it's fine, just give me a list of all your achievements, or just give me a resume and I'll create this amazing persona of you that will stand out to every single college, that every single college will really enjoy looking at. It's still not you. So like whether they'll be able to figure that out, whether it be in your interview, you obviously don't match the thing, or if you are accepted, you might not like it there. You might not be the fit individual for that environment just because your application wasn't truly you. So if a consultant is like looking at your essay and is asking to change it, just make sure that they don't change your meaning and they don't change who you are as a person.
Yeah, and I would like specify that a little bit. I mean, we all have like free consultants and our parents. Some of your parents will demand that they read your essays. For me personally, I don't think that that's a wise choice, because many parents like have this implicit bias, like not saying that like, you know, our parents are biased or anything, but they do have this implicit desire to make their child look the best. And that's not what's going to necessarily be best on a college application. I mean, we all touched upon our essays. Mine was literally about a failure that I really, really didn't like. And like sometimes we write essays about insecurities and stuff like that. It's very easy for parents to get into that sort of thing where they're reading and they're like, oh, I really don't like the way my kid is portrayed. I want to see him as a shining star on a pedestal. That's like a really common mindset. And if your parents infect your essay with that sort of like bloated personality, it'll be detrimental to your application, because college application officers, they want to see a good app, right? But they also want to see a real app, and they can tell if it's bloated, if it's like, you know, propped up on something that isn't you. But oh wait, hold on, a caveat. if your parents are, like really good English people and they like can figure out grammar mistakes or like they have like small suggestions, don't just write it all off as like my parents being biased. Listen to their suggestions, digest it, then decide whether or not that's where you want your college app to go. Because I'm not going to say that all parental advice is bad. I'm just telling you that there is this potential problem, there is this potential bias, but if you can deal with it, then it'll definitely make your application better.
So our next question from the audience is it important to go to summer class?
I'll keep this brief because it looks like there's a lot of questions. I didn't take summer classes. Take that as you will.
I would say that it's probably kind of important that you take summer classes, especially if you're in like Troy High's curriculum or like someplace that emulates that, like Athens or something like that. With these curriculums, I found personally, and a lot of my friends would agree, that like some of the classes are filler classes that are made there to fit state requirements. So stuff like gym, health, like these classes like are like basically an hour of workout for half a semester. Like if you regularly run or you regularly go to the gym, why on earth would you waste your precious time in school on gym? Especially when you could be learning from genuinely qualified teachers on genuinely difficult subjects. So for me, I hated history as well. So I took all of history over the summer, and I knew I wasn't majoring in anything history related. To me, it just seemed like purposeless stress because I didn't enjoy history. So sorry, Shuhung, I really didn't enjoy history. So I took all of those credits, and it really freed up my schedule for me to take stuff that I wanted, including an extra English class and band all 4 years.
Yeah, and I totally agree with what Richard just said. I took pretty much the exact same summer courses that he did. I think we both took gym and health in the summer, and I also was not a person that was really interested in history. I thought that it would be more beneficial to take my history classes in the summer so that I could focus on stuff like chemistry and physics during the school year. But on top of that, kind of to provide a different outlook to whole summer classes, summer classes are really beneficial to get you new connections and new relationships. So I know my first summer class was from 7th to 8th grade. It was a math class. So there I was still in middle school, but in that class, I met so many people from other middle schools that were also going to the same high school, and also people that don't go to the same high school. But through that, I was able to meet so many different people that I still talk to today. And then into my freshman summer year, before going into high school, I took gym and health. That's where I met most of my friends that I have today that I wasn't already friends with. I think that also may have been when I met Richard, and we're pretty good friends now. So I like summer classes on top of just being a good way to get courses that you may not like out of the way. It's really beneficial to meet people from other schools and to just get connections.
Thanks, guys. That's some really great advice. So our next question is, how did you know that the school you picked was perfect for you? And also, how did you narrow down your choices for college?
That was pretty easy. Sorry. That was pretty easy for me personally because my sister actually went to Olin, and I got to visit the campus a couple of times. So with that, I basically already had my dream school in mind when I decided on engineering because I absolutely fell in love with the place. So then I just applied to UMich because UMich. And after I got accepted into UMich, I literally trimmed off maybe 90% of the schools that I was going to apply to regular decision.
Yeah, and for me to narrow down my college, obviously I'm going to the University of Michigan. Most students in Michigan know that this is a really prestigious college and will apply to that. So that was kind of a staple. Also, my older brother goes to the University of Michigan. So I was able to visit campus. I was able to see the environment, and he gave me anecdotes of how he enjoyed the campus. And I think that it was a really good fit for me. But then besides the University of Michigan, other schools that I may have applied to, I first kind of searched them up online, things that were related to my interests, things that were related to business and computer science. And then from there, I kind of had a really big list of all the colleges that had programs that I thought would fit me. So then after that, I looked at pictures of campus, virtual tours, if I couldn't actually make it there in person. And then after that, I just kind of kept on doing research about every single college that I had on my list and just whittled it down until I had a manageable list of colleges.
Oh yeah, so I can answer. I noticed that there were two other questions. One asking me about why I did Harvard as opposed to music school, and another person asking if I applied to any music school. So I think I can answer all these three questions in this one answer. So I applied for a lot of conservatories. I made it to some pretty big ones. And so it was a hard choice between like these really good music schools versus like these really good normal universities. I ended up deciding to go to university because I believe that musicians need a really well-rounded education. If they want to be good musicians, they have to have good knowledge of the world. And because the arts are always shaped by what is happening around the world. So kind of like a mirror of what is happening, what has happened, and what is to come. So I believed that it was important for me to be educated in a lot of subjects. And it was ultimately a very close race between Harvard and Columbia, because Columbia obviously has their like humanities-based core curriculum that I was pretty attracted to. But I ended up deciding Harvard because not only were you able to take similar classes at Harvard, there was also much greater access to resources. Like Harvard, as probably the most famous and well-known learning institution, they have like a huge amount of resources to gain from, a huge number of classes to choose from, and just really top-notch faculty, especially in a lot of the humanities fields I'm interested in looking into, like history and English. So I ended up narrowing it down to Harvard's because not only did it have all those academic resources, there was still like a huge ton of musical resources there. There was a bunch of orchestras you could participate in. There were really solid music classes, even though Harvard doesn't have a performance degree. There's like just a ton of resources that I could gain from. And I firmly believe college is what you make of it, but also that college has to be able to provide those things that you want. And I thought that Harvard would really be able to fuel my visions for my future.
So those are some great feedback and advice. Our next question is, do you have any advice regarding letters of recommendation and who to ask for them?
Yeah, I think I have a pretty good answer to that one. So for me, my letters of recommendation, I got 3 total. One of them was from my physics teacher, which I had my junior year. And the reason I picked him was because I thought that he was a really great teacher. We had a really good relationship both in and outside of the classroom. And then my second rec letter was from my chemistry teacher, sophomore year. And while it usually isn't recommended by most colleges to ask for letters of rec from teachers that you had your freshman or sophomore year, because like you may have changed a lot throughout those years, so it might not be a good representation of you anymore. My chemistry teacher that I had sophomore year was also the teacher advisor of our Science Olympiad Club, so I worked really closely with him throughout basically all 4 years of high school, not just as my chemistry teacher. So he was able to put that into his recommendation letter. So I had some like out of school experiences with him that I thought would be really beneficial. And then on top of that, my last teacher I asked was my Chinese teacher, because we had also a really great relationship. I've had her since my 8th grade, because I first took Chinese in 8th grade and she was my teacher then, all throughout junior year. So that's just, she was able to basically personally witness my improvement over the years. My 8th grade, I like really didn't like turning in my homework. She told my mom, and then like there's all this drama about how like, I was a bad student, right? But then my junior year, there was a really obvious difference of how I evolved as a student and how I became more responsible. And I knew that because of that, she was going to be able to write me a really good rec letter. So I think as like a bottom line, just think of teachers that not only have like a really good relationship with you in class. Like don't just pick a teacher because you got an A+ in their class. So they'll say like, oh wow, and my student is really good because he did well in my class. Like that's all they can say. You want to have a teacher that really knows you as a person, whether that be through like having them over the years or an extracurricular or something else like that.
So our next question is, how are you able to sustain your GPA?
That's a very broad question, especially depending on what high school you're at. But it's mostly just, I think Edison had a little slide on this earlier, but manage your time well. If you manage your time well, you have enough time to study for your schoolwork, pay attention in classes. Just do the tips that is typically associated with succeeding in school. Time management, good study habits, good sleep schedule, not focusing too much on the pleasurable aspects of life, but understanding that what you're doing now is so that you can live a good life in the future.
All right, that's some great advice that I think honestly all of us could use. So this next question, I think I'll ask directly to Richard, given his status as a writing tutor. So the question is, for college essays, specifically personal statements, what kind of tone should you use? Is it better to use formal language rather than informal / conversational language? And how do you balance the two? And what are your suggestions on that?
Ooh, so Shuheng actually said something really good about this beforehand. Your essay should read the same way that it would sound if you said it, if that makes any sense. So obviously, like, the same caveat still applies, right? Don't have incorrect grammar just for the sake of it. That's really stupid. It's still supposed to be a polished piece of writing. It's just not supposed to be like you jammed it through an English dictionary tube and then it came out the other end and now look, it's a beautiful essay. That's just not how that works, right? My first essay actually had a really big problem, which is I was like creating this super complex metaphor between like this hill behind my church and like that concrete structure I was talking to you about beforehand, like the concrete walls versus like the freedom I experienced on the hill. Like I thought I was a genius because I was creating like an insanely complex metaphor, but like, and I thought I like had just written it beautifully. I was like, wow, I'm just a prodigy. I wrote a beautiful first essay. And then my sister read it and was like, I don't get it. Like, what are you trying to say here? Like, are you a good person or like, what's going on? And I realized that, just because there's a lot of metaphors in something doesn't make it a good essay. Just because you are capable of jamming a million words into a piece of paper or jamming 650 really 5-syllable words into your essay, it doesn't make it any better. So I would say, and a relatively informal tone is probably best. And if you have to go formal, there should be a reason for it, like a teacher's lecturing you or something like that. Otherwise, it should really stay informal and use as much quotation and conversation as you can.
Yeah, and I just want to add one really quick thing to this topic. I think that one of the key things about writing a good essay is that if a friend were to read that essay, they can immediately tell that it's your essay just through the voice and the tone itself, not necessarily through like whatever story you tell. Like for me, if my friends were to read that, they would know that it was my essay, not because I talked about my hair that everyone knows about, but because they can hear my voice. It's the way I talk in real life. They can immediately tell that it's me just because of the way that it's written. So I think that's also really important to note, to kind of bring into the whole like informal tone kind of thing.
So our next question is, would you say summer camps at prestigious universities are necessary?
I think I can talk to some of this. Since I was such a music-based person, I actually didn't do any of those like prestigious university summer camps. But I know that if you're able to make it to one of those, you're gonna have a huge chance of making those college, because first you can write about it in your application. Second, you're gonna get a really good rec letter from one of those people. Like, if you, I don't know, I have one friend who did the one at MIT, and she got like a rec letter from one of the MIT people, and it's like MIT sees a good rec letter from an MIT person, they're gonna take it seriously. Although I didn't do any of those, I did a whole bunch of like piano festivals and piano camps and piano competitions that happened over the summer. So while you don't have to do one of those prestigious ones, prestigious college ones, they're going to be really helpful. And if you don't do one of those, do meaningful things that happen in your summer, because especially the summer between your sophomore and junior year, that's the one a lot of colleges really care about, because you can really write about your experiences in those, how you grow as a person outside of school, because that shows your dedication and motivation to who you are as a person. I think I think it was Johns. No, it wasn't Johns Hopkins. I think it was Princeton. They had a whole essay prompt just asking, "What did you do in your summer between sophomore and junior year?" Or was it junior senior? It's one of those. Anyway, summers are important. Do stuff in them.
Okay, so our next question is, I guess this would more apply to Richard and Eddie since they're STEM majors. So, does having an honors English compared to regular English really matter if you're pursuing a STEM major?
I think with regards to that, it's less about, I mean, if it helps, I did honors English because I'm really passionate about English. So that's just something I did because I liked it. I don't think honors English makes that big of a difference in terms of your like application to like specifically the engineering school, but it will make a difference in how like academically studied are you as a person. So as we said before, that GPA and challenging curriculum thing, if you take regular English and you're getting like 110% each year, or like you're getting A plus 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 plus, like that shows to these college application officers, this guy could have done more and he didn't. He didn't challenge himself. And that's the kind of mindset they don't want to see in an engineer. So if you're really struggling in regular English, I wouldn't say, you know, like go stress yourself out and beat yourself up to get to the honors English level. But if you can do honors English, do it. Otherwise, you're demonstrating that you don't have that mind for improvement. You don't have that ability to try harder at something that maybe doesn't quote unquote matter. And application officers will see that.
All right. Well, let's see. The next question is, when did you guys start studying for standardized tests? I'm assuming that this person is asking for like a grade or an age at which you guys started preparing.
For me personally, I started studying probably like the summer of my junior year. So it wasn't really some extensive studying or anything like that. Because ultimately, like we mentioned earlier, the preparing for standardized testing is just the key to it is just to keep on doing it over and over. So whether that be like you take 20 tests over like a whole year or like 10 tests within like a week, it's just you just have to have that repetition. So for me, it was the summer before I started taking standardized tests my junior year. But it can be really different for everyone as long as they have that repetition and as long as they continue to have that practice in.
So our next question is, when you're on a school's website, what are the useful sites to visit to learn a little bit more about the school?
I don't know. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong about this. I don't think the school website is the best place to learn about a school. If you're going to attempt to go to the school, if it's within your financial means or if it's within like your time means, absolutely visit the school because they're like when you're on the school campus, you will feel the energy on the school grounds, right? You can ask the person who's giving you a tour, like, what goes on here, and they'll give you an example that's personalized to them, one person at the school, which is a perspective you cannot like go like be without. If you want to be on the school site, generally what's actually really interesting is that these college websites are super confusing, right? So what they'll have on their main screen is like pictures of smiling students and like their laureates and like what their medals are. That's not what you want to know about a school, right? You want to know what the culture's like. And in my opinion, like the most of those things can't be found on the website, or if they are, they're under like some like super, stand out. Like we have a very energetic culture sort of thing. Like you need to go to that school and visit it if you want to know what the school is like, or take a virtual tour.
There's a small add-on. Keep in mind, school websites are basically just advertisements for that school. Take that as you will. You can look at their faculty, their courses, all that stuff, but they are just big advertisements. So I would recommend getting in contact with people who have gone to that school. Richard said, if you can, try visiting their campus and just look at people talking about the school. There's like lots of videos on it. There's lots of blogs and stuff.
So our next question is once again about essays. So this person is asking, should your essay be something more bright or more dark?
Any answer that we give to that question is wrong because it should be about you. What do you mean by bright? What do you mean by dark? Do you mean it should be about a failure or a success? As we already said, nobody really knows what the right essay to write is. what you need to do is you need to look back in your life, pick out a moment that you learned something. That's where I started from. Where did I learn something? Where did some part of me change? And that's where I start writing. Because no matter how we answer that question, the answer is no.
So our next question is, are individual grades on a transcript more important, or is the curve and average of your grades more important?
I think they're like equally because depending on whether you put your unweighted or weighted GPA, they're still going to look at your transcript regardless. So neither are more important because the admissions officer is going to look at both. So I'd say it's just get the best grades you can, do whatever grade padding with your APs and weighted stuff. I'm not exactly sure all the details of AP, but yeah, they're both like equally important because they're both going to be looked at and evaluated. Remember, the application is holistic.
Okay, so we're only going to be taking a couple more questions. So I'm just going to ask the second to last question right now. So that will be, which math courses did you guys take each year of high school?
So for me, I had a lot of math experience from like private tutors and everything before going into high school. So I tested out of 2 math classes before or throughout high school and before high school. So I ended up taking Algebra 2, 8th grade, pre-calculus, 9th grade, calculus 10th, statistics 11th, and then now computer science 12th. But it's important to note that basically like it really doesn't matter. College, like even if you test out of 5 math courses and you're taking calculus like 8th grade, colleges still see that like as just a class on your transcript. You have to be able to translate that into something meaningful that you can actually show on your application. So like it's while like math courses do matter because they'll look at the course rigor, they'll see if you've taken a lot of advanced math classes, it kind of matters more about how you've interpreted that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. If it helps, I was only double advanced in mathematics. So I didn't get to have like that like extra year of math where I would have taken like Calc 3 or something like that. And as an engineering student, that sort of scared me a little bit. But in all honesty, I don't think it actually mattered. Again, the most important part is like, yeah, you got this education, but like, what did you do with it? Like, why does it matter that you got this great education? I took statistics, Calc BC, pre-calc, and then algebra 2 all the way down, right? I don't think it mattered. I think that I got a good math education. They could see I challenged myself, and that's all that really mattered.
Okay, so now for our second to last question. Which moment or what specific instances shed light on you that helped you decide what your lifelong career or passion is?
Yeah, that's hard. But I think that it wasn't just a single moment. It was a realization over time because it's more often than not, life isn't like it doesn't happen in single moments. For me, music grew on me and it was really something that I just enjoyed doing. But as I went more and more into it, I realized that music and the arts were kind of like the only thing I could really substantially think that gave my life meaning. I couldn't imagine doing anything outside of music. And just the bottomless pit of how ambiguous the territory of the arts is what attracted me. So find something that you can't imagine doing anything else except that one thing. Find something that you could just explore endlessly. As hard as that is to do, just keep searching, just keep studying, keep exploring, and eventually something will grow into something that you will just want to keep on exploring.
Yeah, for me, I actually had a little different experience with that. I actually didn't know that I wanted to major in business until basically college application season, like in the fall. But the reason that came to me was because I started working at a job, and through that, I had a bunch of experiences with like knowing how to run a business, knowing how to manage a business. But I think it's not how like it doesn't just like pop into your head like, oh wow, I suddenly want to study this specific major. It's how your experiences kind of shape that. So I realized that the reason I was so invested in the business, even though I literally never thought that I would major in business up until this year, it kind of was a reflection of my interest in leadership. I love like leading things. I love being in charge and having the power to like kind of shape things to like whatever needs necessary. And that kind of reflects in my passion of business. So it kind of just, you just kind of have to like let it appear as like a result of your personal experiences and interests.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. I also didn't necessarily have a single moment. I think those only really happen in the movies. But I think that for me, I didn't actually know 100% that I wanted to become an engineer until I would say junior year. And I think that led to me missing out on a lot of opportunities that I hope you guys won't miss because I'm telling you to try everything in freshman and sophomore year. So I didn't know that I was going to become an engineer until later on. And I think that like stemmed partly from my just love of creating stuff. And I think that that's like a very generic love, but it's something that really stuck with me. And as Shuhing said before, like it was this concept of just generating was a concept I couldn't live without. And if I can't live without it, then dang, I'm going to do a good job at it. So I decided to major in it.
All right, so we're coming right up on 9 p.m. right now. So now we're going to have our last question, which has surprisingly been asked many, many times by our audience members today. So our audience would all like to know, first of all, do you guys play any video games? And second of all, how do you manage spending time on your cell phone and on social media?
Yeah, I'm a gamer. Oh, I do sometimes, like very rarely. I used to do a lot actually. It was kind of bad, but then I was like, you know what? It's not very like it kind of just faded away. I was like, this isn't a very substantial lifestyle. It's not something I want to do. It's not rewarding. I still do it every once in a while for fun, but yeah, I used to every once in a while. It's not totally harmful. It inspires creativity sometimes. With regards to social media, that's a real struggle I've had just because I love communicating with people. I love talking to people, but how I overcame that was constantly thinking about how little time there is in life.
Yeah, so for me, this is kind of going towards more the parents that are watching this. As regards to games, I personally did not really enjoy playing games throughout high school. So I didn't play games. But then I did know friends that really enjoyed playing games and they were just as successful as I was. So I feel like this whole topic of playing games in high school and whether or not that's really detrimental or not is kind of more catered towards like each individual person. Some people enjoy playing video games as a way to stress relieve. For me, I stress relieve by working out or taking a run. For them, it's just playing video games. In addition, I think video games can also like benefit with communicating with your friends and stuff. So it just kind of has to go with everyone's individual needs. And then if like you do force someone to stop playing video games, you take away all their games. While that can be really good because it'll help them focus on other things, for some people that just kind of really like playing video games, it's only distracting because like all they can think about is wanting to play the video game, but not being able to play it.
Yeah, and I would say I am one of those people that play video games, and I don't necessarily think like I wouldn't be that kind of person who's like I am just as successful as Eddie, but I would like to think that it didn't like destroy my success, right? So I do think that there is a time and a place that video games should be played. If your child is one of those people who is spending maybe way too much time playing video games, it is a conversation you should be having with them, right? Like video games, they are a wonderful part of life, but they are also a huge time sink. So if you spend too much time on video games, as Suheng said before, think about how much time is in the day, how many days you have in a month, how many months you have in a year, and how many years you have in your life. And whether or not you're actually willing to spend that 20 hours playing video games this weekend. Because in all honesty, like imagine how much better of a person you could be if video games wasn't what you spent all of that time on. And again, I'm not knocking on people who play video games. I am one of those people. But you sort of just naturally realize that life's too short. Life's honestly too short.
Okay, so that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much to our panelists for all of the work they've done preparing for this webinar and for providing us with all this insightful information. And thank you to our audience for supporting our first Beat Live. Our next live seminar will be on how to design a SpaceX-inspired rocket using Tinkercad. So head over to our website using either this bit.ly link at the bottom of your screen or the QR code and just sign up. If you'd like to be notified of future seminars, you can also head over to our website and subscribe to our newsletter, and we'll be sure to keep you up to date. That's where we'll also be posting these Google Slides and also the recording of this seminar. While you're on our website, make sure to check out our t-shirt competition results. Those have just been posted today. Again, thank you so much for all of your participation today, and we hope you have a wonderful evening.